Welcome along. Today, Axel Rudikabana, the 18-year-old son of Rwandan immigrants, pleaded guilty to murdering 3 little girls, attempting to murder 8 other children and 2 more adults. He also pleaded guilty to the production of the chemical weapon ricin and the possession of a terrorist training manual. I'll just start with this. How was the murder of those little girls and the attempted murder of everyone else not a terrorist offence? How can it be that the Crown Prosecution Service and police know he's got a manual literally called Military Studies in the Jihad Against Tyrants, the Al-Qaeda Training Manual, as well as ricin in his bedroom, and not put 2 and 2 together and say that he's committed a terrorist attack? Why was it months before the police came out and said this?
2 further offences relate to evidence obtained by Merseyside police during searches of Axel Rudikabana's home address as part of a lengthy and complex investigation which has been ongoing since the 29th of July. The additional charges are the production of a biological toxin, namely ricin, contrary to Section 1 of the Biological Weapons Act 1974, and possession of information, namely a PDF file entitled Military Studies in the Jihad Against the Tyrants, the matter for which Axel Rudikabana has been charged under the Terrorism Act does not require motive to be established.
So they say they can't prosecute him for terrorism. Well, I must say, I think that seems a bit weird, especially when you consider this, because Callum Parslow attacked an Eritrean at a migrant hotel. He had Hitler's signature on his arm, and he tried to post a terrorist manifesto on social media. That was classed immediately as a terror offence. Does it not seem like the authorities have done their best to make sure Axel Rudikabana's case could not be seen as a jihadi terror attack? This brings us on to the next idea of a cover-up, doesn't it? Just an idea. We were initially told that Rudikabana was not known to authorities, but that is not true. He was referred to the Counter-Extremism Prevent programme 3 times, and police had visited his home address on numerous occasions. He had a history of violence. He was expelled from school. He attacked another pupil with a hockey stick. The police must have known this when they were telling everyone to calm down, that he's just a quiet Welsh choir boy. And crucially, at what point did Sir Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper know, A, about his troubled past, and B, that he'd been found with a jihadi terror manual and ricin? Did they know when they went and did this?
Time to change, Starmer.
Come on, needed. How many more children? Is it mine next? Got your photos, off you go. Make a real change, Prime Minister.
Make a real change!
Get children!
Go away!
I just found out my friend's 9-year-old daughter was killed.
You're not wanted!
Did they not know that they weren't just dealing with a nutter with a knife, that this had all the hallmarks of an Islamist terror attack? Now, the day after the attack, Starmer said that he'd been briefed by police.
To get a briefing from the Chief Constable and the emergency services about the ongoing investigation.
So it seems he was briefed by police. Well, what did the police tell him? And then let's just add to this perception of a cover-up, it's just a perception, that we were all shown this picture of Axel Rudikabana, weren't we? There he is. And then today, after he's pleaded guilty, we finally get the mugshot. Now, a bit of a difference there, isn't there? A bit of a contrast. Why was the media and the public denied that picture until now? Does that not indicate that there's an attempt to portray him as a young, angelic-looking schoolboy instead of the evil, demonic monster that he so clearly is? Interesting, too, is it not, the fact that there's been quite a lot of debate about the timing of the trial. When it started on the same day as President Trump's inauguration, the biggest news day of the year, and the fact that there was no indication that Rudikabana would suddenly change his plea at the last minute. For some, particularly as the victims' families weren't even in court today, by all accounts, it all seems like an extraordinary coincidence, that, doesn't it? Equally, it seems unlikely that anyone would have predicted his last-minute change of plea, so there is that. But now we're being told that that is apparently a good thing by the prosecutor.
The prosecution was determined to prove his guilt, and I am deeply grateful that today's plea has spared the families at the heart of the case the pain of having to relive their ordeal through a trial.
So now, Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, has come out and said this: we need more independent answers on both Prevent and all other agencies that came into contact with this extremely violent teenager, as well as answers on how he came to be so dangerous, including through a public inquiry that can get to the truth about what happened and what needs to change. But I hope they can look themselves in the mirror, frankly. I hope they can look themselves in the mirror. Because when both her and Starmer appeared to be suggesting that everyone who had concerns about this was some kind of far-right racist for even daring to think that this may have been an Islamist attack. Did they know a lot more than they were letting on at that moment in time? Now, in my view, what really led ultimately to the summer disorder that we saw was the withholding of information about Axel Rudakabana. I'm joined now by the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. Now, Richard, there are strong views on both sides of this, and...
Seriously?
We will... Well,
I think there's only one strong view, and that is that we are facing the mother of all cover-ups. I mean, you've just read out there a serious list of extraordinary questions and coincidences, and people want answers. And I gather the Prime Minister is going to give a press conference tomorrow morning. There are suggestions that the Home Secretary is going to give a statement to the House. Let's wait and see. If not, for sure there'll be an urgent question. But I think they need to give a lot of answers very quickly.
That the inquiry is going to give those answers.
So hang on. So we can have an inquiry now to kick the can down the road, but they're not prepared to give a national public inquiry into the child rape gangs because it doesn't suit the Labour Party. Once again, it feels like, one rule for them and forget the rest of the British public. You have identified the serious questions that need to be answered there. It is inconceivable that they did not know within a matter of hours that this guy was a wrong-un, a proper wrong-un. They will have known that he had multiple contacts with a various of agencies, and they would have inspected his room within hours of the attack.
So as it stands, and again, maybe this is something that will come out in an inquiry, and we all hope it does. As it stands, you and I sitting here have no actual hard evidence that Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer did definitely. They might say that they didn't.
We will ask them.
It would contempt the case.
We will ask them tomorrow. But as the question that I asked on October the 30th to the Prime Minister is, given that his own independent review of legislation, Jonathan Hall KC, recommended repeatedly that in incidents like this, it is better to put out more information in order to prevent a misinformation gap. And they didn't. And the Chief Constable has got serious questions to answer about why twice, the day after and then on October the 29th, she said this was a non-terrorist incident. If holding an al-Qaeda training manual is not an indication of a political or ideological cause, frankly, I don't know what is.
Now, Nigel Farage, your party leader, took a lot of flack when he came out, and I think we've got a clip, actually, that we can play. He raised some questions, didn't he, in the immediate aftermath of this attack. Let's play the clip.
I posted a video in which I asked a question. Was this man known to the authorities? Why are you not telling us the truth? And for that, I was vilified. From senior newspaper publications, broadcasters, politicians, just for asking for the truth. I was apparently somebody who was encouraging rioting. The opposite was the case.
So that's what he said there. He said he was asking the question whether or not this particular individual, this monster, was known to authorities. And it's turned out he was.
He was. And so, frankly, I think that the government and many MPs on the Labour benches owe Nigel a serious apology, because Nigel was bang on the money and they were trying to mislead, distract, or frankly, just say, nothing to see here, folks. This guy was known to the authorities and there was gross negligence at multiple levels, and there need to be multiple resignations. We cannot tolerate this level of incompetence and feebleness.
When you say who needs to be resignations?
Various people at the top of these agencies. So there are serious questions on lots of people who knew and were involved, and you know, the Chief Constable of Merseyside Police has got a lot of answers to
Do you not think, though, at all, that I'm going to put this to my panel in a second, and Bill Ramell's on the panel, former Labour minister, so I'll go to him. But do you not think that Starmer and Cooper, whatever may have happened at the time, deserve credit now for having an inquiry, calling an inquiry now?
Better late than never. No, sorry, I'm not going to give them credit. I'm going to call them out for not telling us, not informing us, as recommended by their own independent review of terrorism legislation.
All right, well, Richard, thank you very much. You take care. I'll be seeing you soon, no doubt. Right, now, I'm just going to whiz myself over to my esteemed panel this evening. We have the Daily Express columnist, Carol Malone. We've also got ex-Labour Minister Bill Ramell. And, of course, we've got the former chairman of the Tory party, Sir Jake Berry. Bill, I will come to you first on this, because we've heard a lot there from Deputy Leader of Reform. You know, I've also posed some questions that have not necessarily shown Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer, I would argue, in the best light. So where are you on this, Bill? Do you not think that if something caused those disorder that we saw in the summer, it was an information vacuum, and that actually some of the people behind that vacuum might be our Home Secretary and our Prime Minister? Well,
let me come to the heart of your allegations about a conspiracy and a cover-up. I mean, you actually said the start of the trial was deliberately engineered for the Donald Trump inauguration. Patrick, let me tell you, the state is not that capable to organise that level of conspiracy. There's no evidence that the Prime Minister or Yvette Cooper covered things up. What there is, and Jake will know this as a lawyer, there is a concern about prejudicing a trial that is taking place that risks unravelling that trial and somebody like that scumbag being able to get off because of that happening. And I think that is a concern. But I think the government has been right to call for a public inquiry, because there are things about this that I simply don't understand. So on the one hand, yes, you know, he had a terrorist training manual. He'd used toxic ricing, and yet the police are still saying that there was no intent to commit a terrorist act. That baffles me, and we need to get to the bottom of that. It's also a real concern that multiple agencies appear to have failed. You know, 3 times he was referred to the PREVENT programme. There was a very quick inquiry during the summer that determined the PREVENT procedures were implemented in full. Well, how is that possible when there's the track record of evidence of what he's trying to do?
To be honest, part of this inquiry that hopefully is relatively rapid in whatever its findings are, although I'm yet to be convinced, a part of that might shine quite a negative light on your party, Joe. Because if
I think it might do, and we shouldn't run away from that, because this sort of appalling murder of little kids in Southport, we've got to do whatever it takes. If that is embarrassing for the Conservative Party, so be it. Let's try and stop this happening. Just on this date of the trial point, though, and I did a tweet about this today, and I had a little bit of criticism about it. It's right that the courts set the dates of trial, but it's also right that government has real influence over the behaviour of the courts. If you want any evidence of that, look at the fact that Keir Starmer came out on the 7th of August and said, I am going to ensure that people are charged and prosecuted and sent to prison straight away for taking part in these riots. If he had influence over the courts then, the dates and the speed at which they process things, if it was true then, it may well be true now. It's very convenient that it happened to be on the biggest global news day, probably in my lifetime, actually, John Trump's being signed in for saying that people who believe in coincidence in politics should also believe in the fairies, as far as I'm concerned.
I do wonder, Bill, seriously, is it... Sorry, Carol, I'll come to you in a second. It's an important point to get a bit of balance on this, because, you know, is it really fair, realistic, to hide behind... your excuse for the idea that this couldn't be possibly true is that the government is too incompetent to have engineered this. I mean, it's not a great excuse, is it?
Well, I'm talking under successive governments. Right. The state is not capable of that kind of conspiracy and that not coming out in public.
All right. Okay.
Well, we'll see, won't we?
Well, Carol, look, your views on this. Let's deal with one of the important matters at hand here, which is how on earth can somebody who is found with literally the jihadi training manual and writing, how can we not prove causation between that and what he goes and does?
Well, let me just preempt that by saying, tell me how it takes 3 months for a competent police force to arrest someone for these hideous murders. It takes them 3 months before they charge him with this additional terrorist offence, when they must have known. They must have gone into that boy's bedroom, into his house, and they would have seen that on July the 29th, they would have seen this from his equipment. He watched a terrorist video of a man man shouting Allahu Akbar while he stabbed a bishop to death. And very soon after that, this Ruda Banu went out and actually slaughtered these children, doing exactly the same stabbing thing. They must have known by looking at his equipment that he looked at beheading videos on a regular basis. They must have known all of that. Why did it take them 3 months to come out and talk about that? Why did it take them 3 months to talk about the Al-Qaeda manual? Why did it take them 3 months for us to know that he had this Al-Qaeda manual and that he'd be... You know, we now know he was expelled from school at 13 for having a knife. And, you know, Richard was just talking about this, but yet again, we have a situation where the full details of a crime aren't released because a government decides it doesn't want to inflame racial tensions. And here, this has echoes of Rotherham and Rochdale in exactly this way. And I just think, you know, we now have a state that is run by a man who was trying to control the information we get. And can I just say one more thing about, because they've had a good go, because Farage has come out and actually said today that the riots in Stockport were caused Southport because of the lack of information that was being given out, and that it caused a boiling point among the people, and that's when they went rioting. And it is ironic beyond belief that some of the people that were arrested in Stockport for rioting, they were threatened with being charged with terrorist offences, which is outrageous.
If we release the amount of information that you are asking for, you massively risk...
No, you don't.
No,
you don't.
That is not true.
You do not. If you have information to charge someone with a terrorist offence, and they must have had this within hours of arresting that bloke, he should have been charged with that terrorist offence right then. Okay. It doesn't take you 3 months to gather that.
I don't know any police prosecution that works that quickly.
Oh, seriously?
Well, apparently...
Hang on, that one said. He goes... The police go to a killer's bedroom, they find all these videos, they find out his activities, and it takes them 3 months to decide that's incriminating. Seriously.
When within days, they could prosecute people and send them to prison for putting on the internet... Putting on the internet. Let me finish.
To plead guilty, or they
Carol, come on.
Their sentence.
Putting on the internet that this was a terrorist attack. People were actually sent to prison for putting, amongst other things, on the internet. Let me finish. No, let me finish. This is an important point. No, I'm not. I'm not.
You know,
I'm not.
If you plead
these
guilty,
are the facts.
It quickly goes
These are the facts. That may or may not be true, but the facts are that people have been sent to prison in this country for inciting racial hate, for putting on the internet that this was a terrorist attack. If it subsequently comes out that Keir Starmer, Yvette Cooper, senior prosecutors knew, I asked the question, if they knew at the time, if this comes out in the public inquiry, Starmer, Cooper, the Chief Constable will all go.
Sorry, because I want to just put this to Bill, right? Because do you think it is, or was, a little bit disingenuous of Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper if it turns out that in this inquiry that both of them knew very early on, they'd been referred to Prevent 3 times, that he had writing in his bedroom and the jihadi terror manual and been looking at whatever beheading videos that Carol was talking. If they knew about that when they were saying that everyone who was going out on the streets was, basically a far-right racist, do you not think that's a bit disingenuous?
If that is proven at the end of the day, then they will have questions to answer. But I don't think there is evidence that that was the case.
Why not?
Because...
Why wouldn't they know that?
Carol, let me answer the question, because there is rightly a separation of powers between the police and the judiciary and the government of the day. The government does not intervene in operational policing matters.
So why did the police say... After this boy was charged, that there was no terrorist offences involved, because they did. Because they did say that.
But you know what?
Isn't it convenient? Let me just say, isn't it convenient? Is it the slow release of information is convenient for a state that is terrified of unrest and terrified of its own failings being exposed?
So what I'd say is this: as somebody who's actually, and you may have done it as well, attended lots of COBRA meetings in my time of government for situations like this, they start with a full briefing by the concerned. So in this case, I would guess, I wasn't there, but I've been to lots of COBRA meetings, they start with a full briefing with the police officer. This is what we know about this individual. This is what our initial investigations...
Not for individual cases.
No, they do. They do. I've been there. I've seen it firsthand. They do. I frankly, calling a spade... No, for a moment of national crisis, where you have these COBRA meetings, you get briefings from the police. So calling a spade a shovel, if Keir Starmer didn't know about this, and Yvette Cooper didn't know about this, I will eat my hat, boiled or fried.
That's why you need inquiry.
Why does Farage say he was prevented from asking questions in Parliament about this? Why?
Because the Speaker of the House of Commons rightly always says you can't ask questions like that because you'll prejudice a police investigation.
No, look, thank you for that. It's live. So that, I believe, I hope I'm right in saying this, is the kind of discussion, frankly, that's going to be happening on sofas up and down the country tonight. I think in pubs, you know, round dinner tables, and probably has been happening for a few months. But anyway, we are now allowed to talk about it. So thank you. Robust on either side. I'll stress again, hey, look, Yvette Cooper, Keir Starmer, there's no indication officially done anything wrong. We've got an inquiry. They have called for this inquiry, so fair play to them for that respect. But, you know, we have to wait and see. There are questions to answer, and I think, you know, it's right that we have the discussion. Moving on. I believe that we can take you back to Washington now, because President Trump and Melania, there he is. They have just arrived at the Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C. for, I was going to say, the final leg of this victory parade, but it does look to me as though, I thought we was going to start talking then, maybe not. We'll come on. We'll get a bit of a Trump dance first.